everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Stephen Bostel. I'm the Transportation Analyst with the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization. I'm standing in tonight for Aurora Carter. She's the Project Manager on the Aurora Road Corridor Study. So we're going to go ahead and we have our consultant here, Travis Hills, and his staff.
Yeah, so we're assisted, so where's Jane? So Jane is sitting at our table back there. She's our lovely project principal. Most of you had a chance to talk with her. Lika is also standing in the very back trying to hide, so I'm going to call her out as well. So yeah, and as we go through this, we'll make sure once we get wrapped up with the presentation, we'll all be back in the back addressing questions, anything that you guys have once we get through this.
And we have some of our elected officials here from the City of Melbourne. We have Mayor Kathy Meehan. She's also the chairman of our Space Coast TPO, of course. And we have Vice Mayor Debbie Thomas. And we have Councilwoman Yvonne Mike. And I left out some of our TPO staff. We have Kim Smith, at the table there. Abby Rex, she's our new Public Information Officer. Sarah Crom, hiding over there at the poster table. And next to her is Georgiana Gillette. So we will all be available to take any questions you may have around the board. We want everybody's input. It's very important that you all came out here tonight to come and tell us what you have seen out on this corridor. You received your invites because you guys are the experts. You guys live in this area, you travel and work in this area, and so we're doing this corridor study because Brevard County has some resurfacing funds to resurface the road. So rather than just do a run-of-the-mill resurfacing project, due to some issues that we've seen on this corridor, we're looking to see what other opportunities there might be while we're out there doing the resurfacing to accommodate other modes of transportation and fix some of the issues that are out there. So that's why we need you all here tonight, is to look at all those boards really closely in the back and take those sticky notes and let us know where the issues are if we missed anything. This is tonight's agenda. I'm going to talk a little about who the Space Coast TPO is, the study process, the goals of the study, and then I'm going to hand it over to Travis, and he's going to get into the more technical details of the existing conditions. And then afterwards, we're going to convene to the back and talk to everybody one-on-one and really get all your input, because if we just start talking about it openly, we can't take notes fast enough, so we really want to make sure we get everyone's input written down. And so who here has heard of a TPO before? Transportation Planning Organization. So that's a good number of hands. So we are comprised of 19 elected officials representing all of Brevard County. And of course we have Mayor Meehan as our chairwoman. She's fantastic. And we are responsible for coordinating and prioritizing transportation projects that are eligible for state and federal funds. So these are your bigger roads, like your state roads, Wickham Road, the larger arteries. We do not prioritize your smaller road projects on your local streets. That's the responsibility of your local government. Moving forward, this is kind of where we're at in the study process. So we've identified that the road needs to be resurfaced. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room can attest that it needs to be resurfaced, correct? Okay, so given that, like I said, we're going to take this study is going to look and see what other opportunities there may be. But we can't find any solutions until we've identified all of the problems. So that's why we're here tonight. Travis is going to go through and talk about all of the existing conditions, and if there's anything that we missed, we need to hear about it. And so the study goals are to assess the various facilities on the corridor. It's a transit route. There's a lot of bicycle pedestrian activity. There's a bunch of schools in the area, and we're We're going to go through and look at the various cross-sections and characteristics of the corridor as it exists today. And we're looking at the traffic operations and look at the existing traffic operations and the current typical sections. And we will come back to you in the fall with potential solutions once we've identified all the issues. We have Kittleson and Associates, they're great engineers on staff. They do work nationwide, and so they've seen a lot of issues all over the place. So they'll come back to us in the fall with a bunch of different ideas, and those ideas aren't set in stone. We're going to have another meeting, and you guys are going to tell us which ones look good to you, which ones not so much, and we'll move on from there. And so with that, I will hand it over to Travis.
All right. Thanks, sir. Switch over here. All right, make sure this is working. All right, well, I will officially say that last week was my biggest public meeting for Wickham Road. This one is now my biggest public meeting in terms of attendance. So I appreciate everybody coming out. Once again, I'm Travis Hills. I'm with Kittleson Associates. I am the consultant project manager for this project. Like Stephen had mentioned, unfortunately Laura Carter couldn't be with us tonight. She's having some medical issues, so hopefully she'll get well and she'll be with us hopefully for the remainder of the project.
Is she calling now? Actually, she's texting me to ask about the turnout.
All right, so what we're going to do, here's tonight's agenda, what I'm going to talk about. So we'll get in, we'll talk about the project background, I'll give you a little bit of an overview of what we're looking at. We'll get in, talk about the existing conditions analysis, and really what that all boils down to are those issues and opportunities. And so for the folks that have been back, have seen the boards, there were two main boards back there that we really wanted you all to take a look at. And that's the multimodal issues and opportunities and the vehicular and drainage issues and opportunities. And so we'll go through those towards the end of the presentation, make sure that we're hitting the mark, seeing if we're missing anything else, and we're going to open it up at the end for open discussion in the back. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So a little bit on the project. So as most people have seen, hopefully you have gone back on the table where Sarah is and have filled out some sticky notes, put them on the corridor. I saw that there were some other sticky notes on some other boards. That's excellent. That's what we're trying to get out of today. But this is the Aurora Road Study Corridor. So we're looking from Wickham Road down to the East Stewart Avenue. Now, one thing about this is we are also working on the Wickham Road project. That's an operational analysis that goes from Oak Galley up to Lake Washington. The Aurora Wickham intersection is being handled as part of that study. So we've included some of the data here, some of the crash data from a ped bike and vehicular standpoint. But that intersection is being handled as part of that project, which I'm also the project manager of. So if you didn't attend the Wickham Road last week and have any comments on that, feel free to let me know, write them down, and we'll make sure that they get transferred over to the Wickham Road project. Like I mentioned, we're going from Wickham down to Stewart Avenue. A little bit about the project schedule. So this was on the back side of your two-page handout, the kind of overall general schedule of the project. But we are here. This is our first public workshop. We're going to have 3 throughout the course of the project, so we're going to have 2 more. We'll talk a little bit more about that during next steps, and we'll talk more about what we're going to be doing here over the next few months to get to that next public workshop. A little bit on the existing condition analysis. So one thing that we like to do as part of these corridor planning studies is assess land uses that are out there and what's going to be going on in the future. Really, this targets different cross-sectional changes that we may propose, or different land uses where we're tying it back to multimodal issues or multimodal facilities that we have or don't have out there. So what we see is all of the yellow area, that's all of your houses. So we see that we have quite a bit of residential, not directly adjacent to the corridor, but just off the corridor. And then along the corridor, we have a lot of commercial and industrial land uses. And what we see in terms of future zoning is that land use pattern really doesn't change all that much. So we're seeing that all of those houses that are out there today are going to stay there in the future. A lot of the development right along the corridor is going to stay that commercial zoning. So your retail, your Domino's, your shopping centers, different things like that. We're not really seeing that's going to change a whole lot moving forward in the future. One thing that we also like to assess is where people are coming from or going to. And so we look at those different community features. And so what you'll see up here is we tried to hopefully get everyone's neighborhoods that were around there. If we missed any, let me know and we can get it put on here. But really what we're trying to look at, the big things here are the elementary schools. And so, or not the elementary schools, sorry, the schools in general. We have 2 elementary schools in Sable and Croton, and then we have Johnson Middle School, W.J. Creel Elementary, and then O'Galley High School. So this corridor, and what I'll talk about in terms of ped bike volumes here in a little bit, is there's a lot of opportunities here for a lot of pedestrians, a lot of children, high schoolers. I've been out, I've walked this corridor a few times, both during the AM when school is going into session and in the PM when it's letting out. And I can tell you that there's a lot of kids that are at Croton and down at Commodore and Stewart. So a little bit on the existing cross-section. So what we like to do as part of these studies as well is go out and assess where our potential right-of-way is, or our right-of-way lines. And so that's what the ROW stands for up there on the board. And what we're trying to get at is where do we have our right-of-way lines and where can we see room for improvement within the cross-section that we have out there today. So as everybody knows, it's a 4-lane undivided. We call it an undivided cross-section. There's no 2-way left turn lane. There's no median. It's just 2 travel lanes in each direction. They range in width from 10 feet to 12 feet, depending on where you're at along the corridor. We do have sidewalks on the south side of the road for a majority of the corridor. Sidewalks are in not so great condition, depending on where you're at. I know that I've been out there, and I actually, when I went out and walked it, I walked on the north side where there weren't any sidewalks. So I know that I was talking with some folks in the back about the drainage ditches that are out there. I've walked through those, taken a lot of pictures, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on this slide right here, and where we map those pedestrian facilities. So what we're seeing is, like I mentioned on that south side, pretty consistent sidewalk, but it is between 4 and 5 feet and 6 feet wide in some spots. We do have pretty significant gaps in the sidewalk, both on the north side of the road, and then also as you get east of Stewart on the south side of the road. And then we also took some pictures, just to prove that we did go out there and take a look at it, that we have some pictures up here of kind of what we're seeing. And so you can see the picture up in the upper right was taken on the north side of the road, same with the drainage ditch in the lower right side. And one thing that you'll see is I'm skipping over bike facilities and going to transit because there are no bike facilities out there. So we have no paved shoulder, we have no bicycle lanes, we have no buffer bicycle lanes, and the sidewalk isn't wide enough to be considered a bicycle path. And so we're not dealing with any bicycle facilities along the corridor, which is also an issue. So getting into the existing transit network. So for those folks that ride transit, we do have stops on the south side. The Space Coast Area Transit has completed an assessment of all their transit stops in the network, and this was something that came up at our Wickham discussion last week. And so one thing that we're going to be taking a look at is how can we incorporate those bus stop enhancements into our project. I know that they've gone out. Some of those bus stops, they offload you sometimes into a drainage ditch or not really onto a level surface, so we're going to be taking that and incorporating that into our recommendations for the project. And then a little bit on pedestrian and bicycle volumes, and we wanted to look at that for this project because of the emphasis on the school traffic that we have out there today. What you'll notice is that we do have some movements that I've boxed out in red up here, and these were our higher volume pedestrian and bicycle movements along the corridor. We did see a high amount at Croton and at Stewart Commodore, like I mentioned before, and what we're seeing is a pattern of kids that are coming from the neighborhood or going to the neighborhood that are crossing on the north leg of Croton, on the west leg of Croton, on the south leg of Croton. And then over at Stewart Commodore, the east and the north leg are getting a lot of foot traffic. And when we went out there during the PM peak hour, that's where a lot of those high schoolers were crossing that weren't driving. And then we also, in terms of all the multimodal facilities, we also like to take a look at the corridor operations from a vehicular standpoint. And what we're seeing out here is relatively good operations in terms of the actual intersections. And so what you're seeing is these level of services, the B's, the C's that you're seeing up here, it's a letter grade. So F is obviously really, really bad. A is obviously really, really good. So we're kind of somewhere in the middle in that B to C range for these intersections. The other thing that we like to look at is the capacity of the roadway and how much traffic volume we have out there today. What we're seeing is the traffic volumes have been fairly consistent over the past 10 to 15 years. somewhere between 10 and 12,000 cars a day. In comparison to the capacity, because we have a 4-lane roadway out there, our capacity is up around 33 to 34,000. So we have about 3 times more capacity on the road than we have cars today. To put that in comparison, or put it in perspective, Wickham Road has just over 33 to 34,000 cars a day. So Aurora Road traffic is about 1/3 of what you see on Wickham Road with the same number of lanes out there. So just kind of put that in perspective. We also went out there and took spot speed studies. And so these are the 2 graphs that are up here at the top. And generally what we see, and this is something that I haven't really observed, is that relatively people are driving around the posted speed limit. And I know I've talked to some folks in here, people say that they're speeding, and I've seen it. It's just one of those where on the day that this was taken, this was the data that it was showing us. I know that there is speeding out there, and so this is something that I've heard, something that we have noted, and we're gonna try and address that as part of this study. So moving on from corridor operations into crash history, one thing we like to do, or one thing that we do during these studies, is go through and assess how many crashes we had on this corridor. So for the section that we're looking at, we did have 320 crashes between 2011 and 2015. 2 of those were fatalities. I believe 1 was a bicycle fatality, and then we had 27 of those were injury related. So relatively low number of severity crashes in terms of the overall scale. And a lot of that's due to the 128 rear end crashes that we had. So that accounted for 40% of our crashes along the corridor. Typically rear end crashes are lower severity as opposed to your left turns and your angle crashes, which typically account for more of your higher severity or your fatal crashes in any given situation. We also noted the bicycle and pedestrian crashes, and we mapped those out. I know that some folks were taking a look, and I see we got some notes back there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And one thing that was pretty interesting about this is that we had almost 60% of our crashes occurred between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m., so kind of right in the middle of the day. In comparison to Wickham Road, what we were seeing is a higher peak hour. So from kind of 4 to 7 p.m., we had, I believe, 30 to 40% of our crashes. So something interesting to kind of note that this is more of a daytime crash pattern that we're seeing out there. And this board was also on the back. I won't go into a whole lot of detail here, and we can talk about it more when we go to the back of the board. But really what we wanted to highlight here is the segments between the signalized intersections. So obviously the signalized intersections, because we have that permissive or that green ball left turn phasing out there, I know that you do get an arrow, so you do get a protected left, but then when it goes to permissive, that's where we see a lot of our left turn and angle crashes at these intersections. And so specifically at Croton, of our 47 crashes, we had 17 that were either left turn or angle related. So that's something that we're going to be taking a look at when we move forward. With the 4-lane cross section that we see a higher number of rear end crashes and a higher number of left turn crashes. And so we're seeing that on the section from Wickham to Lansing. From Lansing to Croton is the same way. Of those 13, we had 4 that were left turn related. You know, people don't have an area where they can stage and turn left. So if somebody stops in that inside lane and somebody's not expecting them, that's where you get those rear end conflicts for people trying to turn left. Or if you're trying to make a left-hand turn and you don't want to get rear-ended, and you try and rush it, and then you turn left in front of somebody and potentially get hit that way as well. So those were the types of crashes that we were seeing along the corridor. And then a little bit about pedestrian and bicycle, so we went and mapped all these as well. The Wickham and Aurora intersection, that's being looked at as part of the other study, as I mentioned before. But we did have a concentration down at Croton Road, and so that's something that we're going to be taking a look at, and that's an emphasis intersection in terms of pedestrian mobility along this corridor. And finally, to wrap up the existing conditions, and what this kind of does is this springboards us into potential alternatives that we're going to look at over the next few months, is these different character districts. And what we're trying to do is get a feel for what's out there today, what's potentially going to be out there in the future, and how can we accommodate all the different modes and all the different users on the corridor based on the land uses that we have out there. And so what we've seen is that we have kind of a suburban and commercial feel from Wickham Road down to Croton Road. And we have that natural waterway area where the O'Galley River comes up. And there is slated, you know, the land use plans have that area that it can be developed. Not sure if that's actually going to happen in the future, but for now we're kind of calling it a natural area, natural waterway area. Once you move east of Croton, and I heard some comments about the auto dealerships already, and so we have those auto dealerships on the north and the south sides of the road. Some of them are coming right up to the road as well without those pedestrian facilities, and so that's something that we're going to be taking a look at and that we're definitely in tune to along that part of the corridor. And then you kind of go back and transition into your suburban and kind of your mixed use area. And this mixed use has a little bit of commercial in it. I know that there's an apartment complex on the northeast corner of Croton and Stewart where we have a lot of high school kids that are coming to and from there. And this is going to be something that we're going to be taking a look at and seeing how we can accommodate those modes in that section. So those were just the highlights, and what this is kind of leading us to is the issues and opportunities along this corridor. And so from a multimodal side, and this is dealing with, for those that don't know multimodal, so that's everything besides autos, so transit users, pedestrians, bicyclists, the visually impaired, those are the types of users that we're trying to get at with this and trying to accommodate them along this roadway. And so what we see is, we'll just go down the list. Bicycle facility enhancements were one of those things that we're going to be taking a look at. There are no bike facilities, like I had mentioned, along the corridor, and it's something where we're seeing a high amount of bicyclists when we're out there. We went out and observed. We did see bicyclists both in the roadway and on the sidewalk that was out there, and there's certainly a need to address those users and hopefully make it safe for them along the corridor. We also have those pedestrian facilities gaps on the north side of the road for pretty much the entire length of the corridor, and then we do have some spot sections there on the south side, east of Commodore. And then we have those transit stop enhancements, so we don't want to forget that. We're going to keep that in the forefront of our mind. We're going to take those recommendations that Space Coast Area Transit had and incorporate those into this project. And then really the pedestrian mobility emphasis intersections and the school pedestrian and bicycle traffic routes. Those are two big things that we're going to be taking a look at as part of this project and really trying to target what's going on at those two intersections. Where are those students crossing when they're coming to and from school? Do they have a safe crossing? And then once they cross, are they walking up and down Aurora to get to their home or their neighborhood or a business? I know I saw a lot of folks going to, I believe it's a Circle K in the southeast corner of Commodore. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I know there's a gas station there. So if kids are going to that gas station, then where are they going and walking after they leave that gas station? So definitely something that we're going to be taking a look at as we move forward. And then looking at vehicular and drainage issues, and we kind of lump these two together because they correlate. And so what we're looking at is we have these left turn crash emphasis areas. And so where we were seeing those higher numbers of left turn crashes in proportion to other crashes along the corridor, Wickham Road to Lansing Street, like I had mentioned before. And then we also were looking at Commodore to Stewart Avenue and how can we address those left turn movements along the corridor to ultimately make it safer for you all who drive it and for those folks that are going to and from businesses along the corridor. And then we have the two intersections, so Croton and Stewart and Commodore had a higher number of left turn and angle crashes as well. And so we're going to be taking a look at those, seeing what we can do from a turn lane perspective or a signal phasing perspective to hopefully make those intersections safer for the vehicles that are traveling through it. And then we have those drainage facilities that are adjacent to the roadway. And so if you look at these two maps, and where we have those drainage icons are where we don't have sidewalks. And so one thing I like to say is if it was easy, it would have been done already, right? So it's one of those, it's a big issue out there. I know it's something that I've talked with multiple people here about tonight, is those huge drainage issues are off the north side of the road. And what are we gonna do to treat that water to be able to accommodate pedestrians, bicyclists, or accommodate more lanes if that's something that's desired, and looking at that on kind of both sides of the corridor. So a little bit on next steps, and then we'll open it up for our open forum. So we're going to be going through our future conditions assessment. This is going to be using a growth rate along the corridor to project traffic out 20 years and see what those traffic demands are going to be along the corridor at the intersections, and seeing what we can do from an operational and a safety side to address those issues. And we'll be moving through development of different alternatives, like Stephen had mentioned before, and we're going to come back to you all in the fall with a bevy of alternatives that hopefully we'll be able to hit on one or more of your concerns and hopefully get those addressed so that we can start moving forward with appropriate solutions for this corridor. And then this leads me to how you all can get involved. So number one, thanks for being here tonight. So that was the first step, is to come, to participate. You know, we have 2 more of these public workshops, so come to those as well and participate in those. But we're gonna open it up and we're gonna meet, we're all gonna be in the back, or you can come up and talk to me up here. And we're gonna talk about what your issues or concerns were if we haven't talked already. And so that's the first thing you can do. The second, write a note and post it on the boards. I know we've seen a lot of that already. For those that haven't done that already, I really encourage you to do that. We're gonna make sure that we take pictures of all those, log all those, and those are gonna be something that we look at and keep in mind moving forward during our alternatives evaluation. And then we also want you to help to fill out a comment form. So if you want a little bit more detail, Abby was holding that up. Thank you, Abby. So on the back side of that form, there's comments about the project. On the front side is comments about the public workshop and things that we can do to make it better. So feel free, definitely fill that out. It is different than putting a Post-it note back there, so you can get into a little bit more detail. Please do that. And then the last thing is we've developed a comment website for you all that can go on, get on the internet, and we have the maps.kittleson.com/Aurora Road. You don't have to write it down. It is on your 2-page handout, so it's on there as well. You can take that home. If you don't feel like writing something up by hand, you want to do it on the internet, that's how I would probably do it because I have terrible handwriting. So you can get on there. It's pretty easy. You double click and you can leave a comment for the different issues that you're seeing. We check it once a week so we can get on there, log those comments, and make sure that we're addressing that moving forward into our alternatives evaluation. And this is our contact information. So there was also little business cards that had this contact information on there as well. And I believe it's on the 2-page handout. I think we put our contact information all over the place. So you all should have that. Let us know. Feel free to send me an email personally or Laura an email. We'll make